All right. Hi, everyone. I'm the philosophy bro egalitarian for the purposes of this video, and I am going to continue. Well, actually, I'm going to start my series on this book by the classic anarchist Peter Gelderloos, his book called Anarchy Works, and going to basically talk about this interesting maxim that he said in this first chapter of the book, which is that hierarchical societies are unsustainable, which I think is interesting, and you can see on the title. Obviously, I altered this to hierarchy does not work, and but obviously it's slightly different than that. He's not saying necessarily that hierarchy does not work in the sense that it does not ever work under any circumstances, but he's saying that hierarchy can work, but only temporarily, and uh, it's not a type of government system that's sustainable for a long period of time, which kind of makes sense to me, actually. Like I've said before, one of the reasons why I like learning about classic anarchist political philosophy, even though I'm not an anarchist myself, is that they sometimes make some points that I agree with, or at least I think are admirable, or in the case with some anarchists, like I said, classic anarchists tend to be not just anti-government, but also anti-capitalist. So not like these fucking new stupid anarcho-capitalists like Dave Smith, who I respect and I like his personality and I think he's funny, but I don't think his philosophy is coherent at all. But anyway, the classic anarchists, a lot of them were anti-statist or anti-government and anti-corporatism or anti-capitalist. They weren't just anti-government, as I said, but and some of them agreed or disagreed with each other on terms of whether there should be a violent revolution or whether we seek an egalitarian society. So, for example, that's why I named myself Philosophy Bro Egalitarian for this video, because some other anarchists claim that they're not under any illusions that an anarchist society is going to be necessarily egalitarian. There's still going to be the inherent human flaws of when any humans organize together, even in large societies. Like Michael Malice, for example, talks about that, how he doesn't have an egalitarian view of an anarchist society. But Peter Gelderloos, in particular, does have an egalitarian view of an anarchist society, which I think is interesting. And the reason why I like this point that he makes is that he's saying that hierarchical societies are unsustainable, or that hierarchy does not work, but not necessarily that. As I said, he's saying that they're unsustainable. So I think that makes sense because, and I think that's interesting because it seems like he's saying that a hierarchical government system can work, but only perhaps only temporarily and only on a small scale, and not on a not it's not sustainable for a long period of time, and it can't work on a large scale, which I think is interesting because I've often thought basically the opposite of that, and I think a lot of political theorists and political analysts would agree with me about this, that this tends to actually be the opposite of reality, but not. The way he makes this point is still interesting because I think a lot of people would agree with me that it's actually the case that, you know, if throughout human history there were small bands of hunter-gatherer societies, right? And they were never large groups. So some sort of egalitarian anarchist society can work on a small scale with only a small number of people in these small hunter gatherer tribes, which is the way humans evolved to be for most of human history, right? But human history seems to like abundantly show that obviously when the human populations and societies grow to a certain point, it doesn't seem like anyone really knows what the number is. But of course, there's a famous Dunbar number, of which there are actually uh, there's a popular misconception that there's only one Dunbar number, and it means that you can only remember the names of 150 people because we're used to only having a maximum of 150 people around us in hunter-gatherer societies. But there are actually multiple different Dunbar numbers, so the number, the estimated number changes, but somewhere around 150 people are the number of people it seems like humans can cooperate with in groups for a long period of time. So obviously, when you have huge societies of towns or cities or provinces or states or countries, anarchism can't work at that point, and you need government for some things, as I've talked about before, right? Like I kind I find anarchism appealing, but I think that government we should have a strong government for some things. Like I think there should be universal health care, and I think there should be cops and firefighters and lawyers and courts and like maintaining infrastructure and all sorts of other things, and the postal service and all sorts of other things that we pretty much need government for, I would say. But it is interesting, like I said, that um, like I said, an egalitarian society, an egalitarian anarchist society, it does seem like that is possible, but only for small groups of people, for small numbers of people, and for short periods of time. But like I said, Peter Gelderloos, this anarchist, is saying that hierarchical societies are unsustainable, so they can't work over a long period of time. And other than that's the opposite of what I said, that he thinks that an egalitarian society can last for a long period of time and a hierarchical cannot. The opposite of what I would say, which is that an egalitarian society can last if you have small groups of people and temporarily, but you can't have an egalitarian society with large groups of people and it can't last. He's saying that you can have an egalitarian society with lots of people and you can make it last. And I like this perspective, even though I disagree with it, specifically because I find the idea of an egalitarian society to be pretty much unrealistic, but inspiring or aspirational, and it would be pretty awesome if at some point in the future humanity could exist in an egalitarian society, which, like I said, seems unrealistic and impossible, but hopefully that can happen. And the interesting aspect of this book that I'll get to in some of my later videos on this are that Peter Gelderloos actually uses some anthropological examples of various societies throughout human history that that have supposedly been egalitarian societies in his opinions and anarchist revolutions that in his opinion have worked. Although how long they've lasted, I'm not sure. Although it is interesting, like I said, when I'll get into later videos, him talking about supposedly egalitarian anarchist societies in other countries, like some places in Africa, for example, along with others that have apparently lasted for thousands of years. Anyway, yeah, thanks everyone for watching this video. I think I've talked about this maximum enough, that hierarchical government systems are unsustainable. I think that's an interesting, because I like this criticism of hierarchy, because I often criticize people like Jordan Peterson, for example, talking about how, oh, hierarchy is natural because the lobsters are hierarchical and we've evolved from lobsters, so humans should be hierarchical. But obviously that's not necessarily true. Like, you should have some degree of hierarchy, perhaps depending on what government system you have, and people should agree about that in some sort of democratic system. But hierarchy is not necessary. Ideally you could have some sort of like committee governing on things like that. I don't know. I mean, something like anarcho-syndicalism, which is some form of anarchism, which I've heard about, is interesting. Not exactly communism, but the citizen, like the citizen owned the citizens owning the means of production and controlling the government and stuff, like everyone voting on everything. But like I've said before, also a criticism of like any sort of socialism, or well, not any sort of socialism, but any type of extreme leftism or anything like that, is having to do all this research to be able to vote all the time. Which, and Thaddeus Russell, the historian I like, who I've mentioned before, I do think it's an interesting point that I don't want to do all this work, doing all this research to vote on literally everything. That's one of the advantages of government, I think, one of the many advantages. But obviously, government can be too small, or there can be a total lack of government, or there can be too much government too, like in fucking communism or Marxism or whatever, right? So anyway, yeah, I think this is an interesting point, even though I don't entirely agree with the conclusion. I like it because it's inspirational. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments about this classic anarchist, Peter Gelderloos's opinion that hierarchy does not work, or hierarchical societies are unsustainable. What do you think about egalitarianism versus hierarchy? Do you think hierarchy is natural? I don't think it actually is. I think most social scientists and scientists of most kind, or archaeologists and anthropologists, would agree with me that hierarchy is not actually necessarily natural. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know what you think about anarchism versus like socialism and liberalism and conservatism and all that kind of stuff. And what do you think about Peter Gelderloos's opinion that we can have egalitarian anarchist societies that can be sustainable and last a long period of time with large numbers of people? Uh, and let me know what you think about that interesting opinion. And yeah, check out my future videos on this book that I will continue making. Check out my other videos. Check out my clip from the other day, which was me commenting on the professional mangler of philosophy and former mathematician James Lindsay, um, making this insane claim that woke trans groomers are taking over the world. So check out that criticism. And then I have another clip coming out. I think the next one will be talking about the common misconception that some of my famous post-structuralist philosophers, Foucault and Derrida, were allies in this monolithic philosophy called postmodernism, which neither of them had ever heard of, and they were actually arguably intellectual enemies. So check out that upcoming clip later tonight too. And yeah, smash that like button, demolish it, molest it, elbow drop it, whatever you want to do, as long as you press it. Subscribe to the channel. A lot of people watch the videos but don't subscribe, so make sure you subscribe. Check out my Patreon page. The link is in the description of the video as always. Click that link to be notified when I come out with new videos. And of course, most importantly, like I always say, always remember this: the funk cures all, and grooves in the heart. And philosophy is fascinating. Political philosophy is fascinating. Anarchism is interesting, even though it's too extreme in many aspects. Like many other political ideologies, like polar opposites, like communism. All right. Thanks again, everyone, and adios until next time.